I like CBT because I can give a person like a bird's eye view of their thought process. I feel like that's a lot of what I do is I put words to a person's feelings. Some forms of traditional masculinity that we need to keep, and then some things that we need to omit. And it's so hard to identify.
First, we're going to figure out what the hell's going on and what you can do to make tomorrow just a little bit better. Is it possible to stay logical and still do the work to heal? Why do so many guys get stuck in loops, and what actually breaks them out? If you're curious about the answer to those, then you're in the right place. My name's Tim Winnicky. This is American Masculinity. And on our 8th episode, we have Bryce Jennings coming on. Bryce is a great guy, but he's also a good clinician. He's been doing this for almost a decade now, helping guys navigate any number of problems. And his focus is a little different than mine. He focuses mostly on cognitive behavior therapy. So we're really lucky to have him. I'm really excited to share his insights with you. Let's get started. Hey, Bryce, thanks so much for coming on, man. I'm really happy you're here.
Of course.
I probably told folks in the intro for you, one of the things that made me want to bring you on is that you're primarily seeing guys, but you're also seeing it from a different lens than I normally do, which is that CBT skill set that you have.
Gotcha.
And so I'm really excited to bring that on because it's such a well-researched and fundamentally sought after approach for men. And so it's kind of cool to have somebody to talk to about it because I haven't looked hard at CBT since grad school.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Like DBT, skills stuff, absolutely. But, you learn over the course of the field when you meet somebody who's good at something. Like that, it's a lot more interesting.
Of course. And so I found that CBT is what aligned with how I thought and how I experienced change in my own life. And and then it's the style that came most naturally to me.
I think for a lot of us, the reason why we pick a modality that we pick is because it worked for us on some level. Has that been true for you?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of the time when I'm thinking, it's a lot of introspection, and I think about how I think, and I think about how I think about myself and the world and others, and then when I gain an understanding. For me, it came on like more of this cognitive level. And so a lot of the times when I had trouble accessing my emotions, which was an uphill battle for me for being a therapist, I often thought about, well, what do I think about this and how ought I feel? And then with that, I gained access to my feelings. Because for a long time, I wasn't very emotive, and I kept on getting comments about, "Oh, you're very chill and calm, and do you get rattled?" And I'm like, I certainly think I do.
Feel rattled.
Yeah. And then, so really being introspective about my thoughts, let me recognize what I'm feeling, and so that was the route that came most naturally to me.
Well, and that's not something that I certainly think of when I think of CBT as like thinking to get access to feelings.
Yeah.
And so I think that explains a lot about the people that like it and come out the other side. It's not that they all become like these stoic automatons, right?
Yeah.
Because that's, I think, a picture a lot of folks have when they think of cognitive therapy.
Yeah, that's the reputation. It's robotic and manualized, and part of me thinks it's an earned reputation with CBT. But then also I like to think of it as, well, in my experience, a lot of the times people that men that gravitate to my practice, it's because they're overthinkers and they're not quite feelers. I get a lot of people that describe themselves as analytical. And then when how a person thinks goes unchecked, it can go awry and then lead to feelings that may be very prominent and outward, and then feelings that are not recognized,
unnamed, and just kind of tumultuous that way.
Yeah. And so that makes sense. And so with cognitive behavioral therapy, I think of it almost like a sequence. We have this activating event, a stressor. And then with that activating event, a person has their impressions of it. This is what I think of it. And then that leads to a person to feel and then behave. Okay. And then
so event, thought, feeling, behavior.
Exactly. And then a lot of times people come to me because I have these analytical thinkers, and then despite them identifying themselves as rational, they do things that are almost in spite of reason, and it's so confusing to them. Okay. I know that it doesn't make sense for me to play video games all day. I know it doesn't make sense for me to slide into somebody's DMs when I'm in a partnership. Okay. But for some reason, I keep on doing it. Okay. And then I think what CBT is really good at is identifying how does this stressor or this event lead me to thoughts that I may or may not be aware of. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the feeling that I'm responding to, or maybe a feeling that I would want to experience more in a way that sometimes can be beneficial or pro-social, and then sometimes can create damage or compromise functioning. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the cognitive end of these things always like touches on my narrative. Like the story you tell about the event is always going to impact what the event does to you.
Yeah, of
right?
course. It's the lens in which you see the world.
Yeah.
Oh man, it's important. If somebody has a tinted glasses, and then they're gonna be depressed, and then it's ideally we're viewing it with accuracy. Yeah.
What I'm really liking in the approach is particularly for those guys that anytime I hear a guy who says I'm analytical, what they tend to mean, or what I hear is, I like to have a process.
Okay.
Right. And usually what that means is whatever they're trying to do, my process isn't working.
Yeah. I see that too in my practice. And so, well, and then oftentimes those analytical thinkers, they're using their reasoning and analysis and planning and sequencing, and almost in despite of feeling. And
they're like twisting themselves in logic loops to not have the emotion change.
Yeah. And then sometimes when I understand their thought patterns and I help my client understand theirs, okay, they realize, despite me being analytical, like the way I'm thinking is not very fair or efficient or kind or balanced. Okay. And then I like CBT because I can give a person like a bird's eye view of their thought process. Okay.
Yeah. Just that impartiality that you have allows you to kind of name the pattern, name the like sequence of events in a way that they can hear it.
Yeah. It's like a mirror. And so I didn't realize that I had stuff stuck in my teeth until I looked at it. And so, yes. And then I like to get with CBT, now that we know what your thought process is like, okay, when did it make sense for you to adopt this thinking pattern? Okay. When was it advantageous? And then now that we're recognizing now, like, does your thought process need to be updated? Did the rules back then still apply now? Okay. And then that's when they can really evaluate and edit what they think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's one of the more freeing things that certainly in my life, when I remember to do it to myself, but for clients, so often it's, you're not an idiot. You're not an asshole. At some point in your life, that behavior worked.
Yes.
Like this got you what you needed at a rough time. And probably at a time when you needed simple things, like when you were a kid.
Of course.
And just that knowledge of like, oh, wait, I'm not deficient. I just need to grow. Which is that's a big jump, right? From just I'm bad.
Yeah. Well, that's when I would ask, when did it make sense for you to think of yourself as deficient? Okay. How did the lens of deficiency for yourself make sense for what you are experiencing? Okay. Because I mean, that's often what we're trying to do as we develop our views, is make sense of what's going on. Okay. What's the world like? What's my family like? What are relationships like? And then also, like, how do I fit in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I just see it a lot with that, like the shame and anger spiral. that so many guys fall into, where there's a behavior or something like that they want to change out. And so they have that some form of deficiency story where they shame themselves.
Yeah.
Until whatever that behavior was doing to take care of them isn't getting handled.
Yeah.
And then the anger blows up, or the fear blows up, and they get really anxious or something. But it's just this cycle of discomfort,
of course,
over and over and over.
Okay.
Is that what you're seeing?
When I encounter shame in my practice, okay, and then shame is this experience that is so insidious. When they explain what's happening, okay, the thoughts, the story that they're telling themselves, okay, their perspective, and with shame, it comes in the form of I am bad, I am not enough. Okay, the example I like to use is if I were to, for some reason or another, lie to my wife. Okay, this shame response that I could have is I'm a dirty liar. Okay. And then with shame, it keeps me doing this behavior that I don't like about myself. I don't like that I lie, but I'm a liar, so I'm going to lie. Okay. And then that's when we get to identify, okay, this is how you think. And it sounds like your thoughts are labeling yourself a certain way. What would it look like if it took more of a form of guilt? Okay.
That transition.
Yeah. What would be the guilt response? I lied, and then now my wife is hurt, and now I feel bad. Okay. And then what is this going to do for the future? How is it going to impact my behaviors? The next time I have this opportunity to lie or this knee-jerk reaction to, then, oh man, that felt bad. And then I don't want to do that anymore.
Well, and it feels so much lighter. So I think it's important to kind of frame this out a little bit more for the listeners. Of shame is I'm a bad thing. Guilt is I did a bad thing.
That's important.
Right? And it's so much harder to fundamentally change who you are than it is to just change a thing you do.
Of course. And so, I mean, talk about a tall order. Let me just change my identity.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of shame. Like, it's an uncomfortable emotion, but every emotion has its place. And the beauty of shame is it's designed for connection. Where either you take this part of yourself that doesn't fit within your community and you bring it to your community of close, like somebody close to you, somebody that's going to make that call as to whether you're with us.
Yeah.
And either they normalize it for you. They're like, why are you ashamed of that? Everybody eats ice cream. You're fine.
Yeah.
Or they help you reframe things and help you grow. Like that's in an ideal setting, right? We very rarely find them.
Of course.
But then guilt is that easier move, right?
Yeah.
We don't need this big connection point from somebody else. We can just look at this. I don't like this behavior. I don't like how it's impacting the things that are important to me.
Yeah.
That's a lot of reason right there to change it. That can be enough. I don't have to change me. I just need to change my relationship with this thing.
Yeah. So, and it's interesting. Well, when I think of shame, one of the things that it provides is an explanation. Okay. It makes sense. I got rejected because I'm unlovable. Okay. And so it's nasty to think that way. And also at the same time, there's clarity. Okay. And so I find that that's often how people get attached to their shame because it becomes a belief. And and when person has established beliefs, there's like a sense of security with it.
Yeah. It's that kind of way towards pathology, right? Whenever we identify with being the thing that hurts like this, it's almost impossible to change it. Like I'm just this person. Yeah. This is who I am. I do these things. And it's just a heavy lift.
Of course.
And I think for me, when I've fallen into the pattern, it's because there's freedom in it of just like, yep, this sucks, but I know what happens next.
Like familiarity?
Like we'd rather have pain we're familiar with than hope for the unknown.
Yeah. I mean, that's scary. Unknown hope.
What are you seeing in your practice right now? Like what's the, top kind of 3 things that guys are coming in for?
Okay. Well, what I see in my practice and the people that gravitate towards me, okay, it just turned out this way that, I tend to be doing therapy with this type of person and this type of presenting problem. And yeah, I'm getting traction. Okay. And so with that, it comes in, to speak about it broadly, it comes in some form of, I feel stuck. Okay. I feel stuck with this feeling. I feel stuck with my life circumstance. I feel stuck with this relationship that may be good, but I keep getting stuck in the same events. Okay. Yeah. And then when I boil it down, I mean, talking about the thoughts and beliefs that I often encounter. Okay. It's, am I enough? Am I fulfilled? Okay. Or am I safe? Okay. And so a lot of times I experience these themes in my practice, and I help people understand, how did this come about? And then what do we want to do about it? And so, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's just somebody who's stuck and they find you.
Yeah. And then in the stuckness, often it comes in the form of depression, and then often it comes in the form of anxiety. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
The kind of two pivotal American problems at the moment.
Of course. And so, yeah. I mean, when I think about my service in mental health, okay, oftentimes I'm the therapist that people see when they haven't been to therapy before. Or they're in a relationship and they're a mandated therapy client. You need to go to therapy or else X, Y, Z and things can happen. Yeah. Okay. And so with depression and anxiety and what I use with cognitive behavioral therapy, I like to think of this as the first introduction to therapy for a lot of people. Okay. Yeah. And I have my limitations. Cognitive behavioral therapy has its limitations. Therapy itself has its limitations, but
100%.
Yeah. And then when I counter something that's outside of my scope, I feel like I can guide them to a more specific intervention. Yeah.
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 Well, I think that's the key to be good at the job. You have to have a successful practice because you need to be willing to refer.
Yeah.
And it's this, I think it's one of the big harder points of our field is that if you're off on your own in your own practice and business gets slow, you're kind of externally pushed to work with things that you probably shouldn't.
Of course.
Yeah.
That happens all the time. And it's talk about an internal conflict. Okay. I'm a small business owner, and then also I'm a therapist that needs to do his due diligence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's always nice when you can like find a consult that you can pay for to keep going and learn something new. But even that I feel sometimes is a bit of a stretch.
And the time to do it, and then the finances, and then I have a busy life. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. A lot of cool parts of my practice have come from that too in that stretch. Like when I opened up the doors, I advertised as men's issues, right? Veterans, first responders, and men's issues. And when I put up men's issues, I meant like fatherhood, male identity, right? Male trauma. And instead what I got is a lot of calls about people's penises not working.
Oh. Right? I've encountered that too.
Well, a ton, right? Like, hey, what's going on? Why isn't he talking to me anymore? Help me out.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden I'm like having active consults with all these sex therapists and like, having a regular call with a urologist going, okay, so is this physical or anxiety or, and then, like most things, right? 80% of the time, it's just that they don't like their partner in some way or form, that there's some discomfort there that they're not addressing.
Yeah. And that's when I would say, well, since you called a behavioral therapist, this is what I think. But then if you talk to another person in a different field, you're going to get a different opinion.
Yeah. So. Well, the big one I always like to frame it is to guys is that your penis is like a mood ring, right? At a certain point, it won't fake with you.
It's a truth teller.
Well, so have you found yourself, since you've become a father in practice, are your fathers coming in more? Like, is that kind of paralleling you at all or no?
Let me think about this. And so I think the most noticeable difference is it's not quite the population. Okay. I've had this practice before my sons were born, and it's interesting because self-disclosure is such a big consideration as a therapist. And then on the spectrum, I tend to be on the more reserved side. Okay. But then,
well, that's also just the CBT approach is more reserved in that regard.
Yeah. And so CBT approach, my personal philosophy on how therapy works, the focus needs to be on the client, and self-disclosure sometimes compromises that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So when you're about to prepare for kids, that's something that you can't keep hidden. Okay. I'm going to be out for 2 months, and then it's natural for a person to wonder why. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not quite the population I see has changed, more fathers compared to less fathers. It's more of how it comes up in therapy, since they know this is what I'm going through.
More likely to broach it with you.
Yes. And for it to, my experience as a father, to impact what happens in the therapy room.
Well, it's so funny. I think people are just more willing to talk about parenting with parents.
True. Yeah. So
it's always kind of weird for me because I do a lot of parent coaching and don't have kids. And so there's always this little rub every time it gets in there.
Yeah.
Right.
In my early times in my career, I was a adolescent therapist, and then talk about how to raise kids when I was 24. And
you were a baby.
I was. In many ways still am. So
thank God, man.
Yeah.
Stay young forever.
So I see it coming up in my practice more where somebody's struggling with fertility, and they know that I just have had 2 new kids come into the world. Okay. Yeah. The questions like, I know that I don't want to have kids because of the uncertainty of their world. And then they know that I just brought kids into the world.
So it's going to be a bit of a discussion point.
It's going to be a discussion. So I've asked on more than one occasion, how does it feel to be talking about this with somebody that just became a father? Yeah.
I think that's the trick, is that once a disclosure has been made, if you don't consistently check in on it, you're doing it wrong. The best advice I ever got was actually in my first counseling class in grad school with one kind of masculine professor I had that I still actually like, that we're kind of peers now, which is super fun for me. But he said all the different theories have different ideas on what self-disclosure should look like. The rule that I follow that's worked really well in my career is, when I get the instinct to self-disclose, don't. And then think about what was going on for that client and what was going on for you after the session. And if it's for the client, it'll come back around and you'll be ready to disclose.
Yeah.
But he was really transparent, and 4 out of 5 times it wasn't about the client. It was, something going on with me in that moment.
This reminded me of this thing that happened, and now I want to share it. And so, the messages early in my career about self-disclosure, especially with working with adolescents, is don't disclose something that you haven't processed. And so if they throw it back to you in their adolescent way, are you prepared? And so,
it was really complicated going through the divorce and when to tell clients, right? Because they're going to notice I don't wear my wedding ring anymore. Right?
That's a big one. One.
And so a lot of the guys, it's pretty common in my practice, because I see so many guys like me in a lot of ways, that for one of my normalization techniques is, and it's not technique, it's also just to connect, is guys like us.
Yeah.
Comes out of my mouth a lot. And so then all of a sudden I'm like, hey, how's it feel to be coming to me for skills on how to keep your marriage going when mine just ended?
Oh, that's a big one. You get a range of answers.
I do. I'm like, man, I got good cautionary tales, and those who can't do teach, man. Let's go. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. And I'm sure there'll be a day when somebody comes to me that has a hard time controlling their emotions, and it comes out of anger towards their kids. And it's like, oh man, well, I just went through that same episode. And so, yeah.
I think that's the hard part for a lot of dads I work with, is that I feel like the first generation of men changing diapers, and we're starting to have men be expected to be around kids again, which is a net positive by all metrics. Guys that are around kids, their life is longer, they have more fulfillment. So it's very much not that boomer ideal of oh man, be free, go get your toys and stay away from kids.
Yeah.
But all the guys I work with, they're like, I'm so much better than the culture that my father was in.
Yeah.
But it's not enough.
Oh.
People still come at me so hard.
Okay.
If I'm a 6'2" guy and I yell at my kid, I'm not proud of it. No one should be proud of it. But everybody has it happen at some point. Children are maddening.
Yes.
But because I'm a big dude with a beard, people are reporting me.
Yeah.
Like it's not,
And
it's
big
not a
dudes
small
with beards
thing.
are human too.
Is right.
Yeah.
Just very scary to everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's quite a delicate balance. And so, I mean, when I think about my role as a dad and having 3 boys, there's a pressure. They need to have elements of traditional masculinity. Okay. And so for how flawed traditional masculinity is, there's still some things that we need to keep.
And navigating which is which.
That's big.
Is constantly a negotiation.
That's big. Okay.
Yeah.
And so how does a boy become strong in the way that makes sense for them? Okay. And create a sense of competency and self-assuredness. Okay. While also being kind and compassionate. Okay. Reading the room, okay, and understanding what it needs. Okay. That's a big step that a lot of times wasn't expected of men. Okay. And then how the hell do we teach this to kids?
Well, I think for boys, what I try to do with it is frame it as a competent action. Like, a lot of my friends are in tech, and I'm probably an over-involved friends with their kids since I don't have them. Right.
Okay.
This is my I get to do this. And the big thing I try to bring to them is the dads, they're good guys, but they're not exceedingly emotive, and they don't read a room particularly well. That's why I'm in the group. And so, I just have a lot of fun asking boys, like, hey, what's going on with them?
Yeah.
What are you reading right now? Like, how do they feel? How are you feeling about that? All right. So what do we do with that guy? What's up?
Of course.
Yeah. And rather than this kind of natural connection point that I see women kind of educating girls on a similar level, it's not as spelled out, right?
Yes.
It's much more modeled.
Yeah. Modeled. And then, and oftentimes I feel jealous about how women often connect with each other. Like, wouldn't that be nice? Okay. I'm like, we have a difference of opinion, huh? And so
yeah, we do.
Oh boy. And so, but what you were saying reminded me of a nice win there was this one time when my toddler was not listening. Okay. And that was a big deal.
Man.
And then the pressures of being a dad and a therapist and I need to model naming my feelings. Dad is feeling frustrated and dad is feeling frustrated when you don't listen. And and then he gave me we call it the dragon lovey. Okay. And so it's the plushy toy. And then so he gave it to me to help me soothe. And that was while being frustrated.
Like, I love you, Dad. This is going to help you. It helps me.
Exactly. So, So even though we're late for school and he doesn't even have pants on, we're doing something okay. So,
yeah. I think that's the glory of parenthood. I think I feel like as therapists, we live in people's childhoods a lot.
Yes.
Right. And it gives me a lot of peace when working with parents because I'm like, look, man, you don't know what's going to stick.
Oh, of course.
So just make all the moments you can and understand that they're going to tell a story that does some damage in their mind about whatever happens. Because I've got job security, don't you worry.
Yeah, but I am so interested in my son's grievances towards me when they're 25.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be a great conversation.
I want that performance review.
Yeah, well, and I like the idea of it happening 25, 35, 45, because my perspective on just what was going on with my father and my look at how the different things that he did or didn't do, the understanding of what his situation was changes drastically as you age as well.
Yeah.
And it brings up different grievances.
Of course.
And different bits of peace. And so that's always fun. I like how many of my guys can have some of those conversations with their dads.
Yeah.
It's really healing because if the dad wasn't a total piece of shit, it's really good for the son to be heard. And it's better for the son and father to have it on the table so the resentment's not in the way of the relationship anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing more and more kind of older dads recognize that a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you been seeing any of that where people have been able to do a little bit more reconciling than they used to?
It depends. Okay. So there's sometimes when I talk about my clients' experience with their father, and we can add mothers in there too.
Yeah, parents are parents. Yeah.
Yeah. It depends on what they can reasonably expect from their parents. Okay.
Yeah.
I know that if I were to bring this up, my dad is going to react in this way. And I know that because of a lifetime of precedents. Okay. And so that gets to the point where it's, even though it might be sad and difficult, it's like, accepting the father that you were born to. Okay. And
it's that Ted Lasso quote. I try to love my father for who he is and forgive him for who he isn't.
Ted Lasso.
So good.
So good. So good. And then sometimes it can be a dialogue. Okay. And then that's where I help my clients that come to therapy when things are going on. And then we come to realize like, okay, there's history there that we need to address. Okay. And it can be incredibly cathartic, but also it's incredibly risky.
Yes. It's often a matter of expectation setting, I find. And it was certainly true with me and my father. Like we had some really beautiful moments, but the kind of grievances I discovered in my patterning in my 40s, he couldn't understand them, right? Okay. It wasn't that he didn't love me. It wasn't that he wouldn't talk. Is that he's like, why is that not okay?
Oh, this doesn't compute.
Yeah, like this is not, what are you even talking about? It was so against his personal story of who he was as a father, who he was as a man.
Yeah.
That it just couldn't even be conceived of. And I think going in with some like if it feels good for you to get it off of you and you want to hand it to them, understand they might throw it back.
Yeah.
And then what? Like if the hope doesn't happen, what do we do?
The way that I talk about it with clients is we're about to go into this incredibly heavy conversation. And so talk about the weight and gravity of what we're about to do. Okay. And then can I give your anxiety a platform? Okay. And so if you're anxious about this, and then we imagine the worst possible yet probable outcome.
Yep.
Yeah. What would happen to you?
And can you take that?
Yeah.
No, really, like take a minute and really think about and sit with, if that happens, what'll happen to you? Yeah.
Yeah. And then how would you want to respond to those feelings? What would happen to your thoughts? Okay.
I feel like so much of our job is like creating a name your own adventure book.
Yes. I mean, I think it's beautiful. Like when we put words to feelings and then somehow they become released. Okay. And especially when we express those feelings, they become released. But talk about analytical thinkers having trouble naming their feelings.
Yeah, they tell you a story and then you're like, well, I understand what happened. What happened inside of you, but I just told you. No, you told me all the events.
You gave me the plot synopsis, but what's the literary analysis?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess one of the things that I'm kind of hoping for out of this conversation too is, what's a basic kind of CBT skill that if everybody learned at 14, their life would be better?
Okay, let me think about this. Everyone learning at 14, which tool?
Like my life would have gone so much better if I'd have known how to do this when I was young.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about this. So identifying the thoughts, and then like it's varying levels. Okay, so cognitive behavioral therapy likes to really talk about automatic thoughts and then the assumptions and then the beliefs. Okay. And then a lot of the power of cognitive behavioral therapy is recognizing what's beneath the surface. Okay. All right. The example I have to use, it comes with the primary and secondary emotions a lot of the times. Okay.
What do you mean when you say primary and secondary emotions?
Secondary emotions often come in the form of annoyance and frustration and anger. Okay. Things that a lot of men experience and a lot of men express. Okay. And so, and then what is the primary emotion or the assumption or the belief that's fueling that thought? Okay. When I'm driving on the highway and then I get cut off. Okay. My automatic thought is you. Okay. My behavior is flicking them off, honking my horn. Okay. But then what's fueling that? It's this it's this assumption I might have been hurt, okay? Or there are rules to the road and to society and you're breaking them, okay? Yeah. And then really identifying what is fueling that automatic thought or that knee-jerk reaction of emotion, okay? And so we can navigate the part of the iceberg that's beneath the surface, okay? And responding to that instead of...
Is this one called the thought mapping, if I'm remembering right?
So it's more... So there's thought mapping, thought logging, okay? And I see that as a little bit of different, okay? And so so thought logging, it's, I have this stressor, okay? The boss called me into an impromptu meeting, okay? All right. And then it's a relatively ambiguous stressor, okay? We have no idea what the tone of the meeting, what it's going to be about, okay?
That's out of nowhere.
Yeah. But then if a person's thought is, oh no, I'm in trouble, okay? Or maybe they're talking to me about my potential promotion, okay? That is hugely impactful to a person's mood and feeling.
How you walk into that meeting.
And how you walk into that meeting, okay? So it's really, so thought logging is more about, I experienced this event or the stressor, okay? And then what were the thoughts that followed, okay?
And just by naming them, a lot of times it's easier to give them nuance. And
but it's easier to give them nuance and it's easier to evaluate them. Okay. What don't I know? I don't know what the subject of this meeting will be. Okay. So I recognize that it could be anxiety provoking that I'm going to get a talking to, but I don't have a whole lot of evidence for that. Okay. Yeah. With identifying automatic thoughts and assumptions and core beliefs, that's a little bit deeper than thought log in my opinion. And so, yeah. And this is where
it's almost more like it goes from like an immediate response to like, what's the story?
Yes. I mean, we can take an example of like rejection. Okay. And so if a person's automatic thought is, oh, of course she didn't say yes to that date, or of course I didn't get that job interview. Okay. The assumption could be something as like, yeah, it's hard out there. Okay. Or maybe I wasn't her type. Okay. Sometimes the assumption can be, of course she rejected me because I'm ugly. Okay. And then we get to identify what the belief is underneath that. I'm unlovable or the world is out to get me. Okay. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
I mean, a little bit. Yeah. So the base level is the way that I think of it, which makes sense because of a very base understanding of CBT, which is activating event. What's the thought? If you write down the thought or you take time to analyze the thought, you're going to realize you're missing a very broad swath of the picture that gives you a lot more freedom to move.
Potentially. Yeah.
And then what you're saying is the fundamental thought about who you are in the world.
Yeah.
And understanding what's happening with that in a given moment in time is critical.
Yeah. I've got a yes, but not quite.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Okay. So let's say I'm working with this person. Okay. And then we identify their common automatic response or automatic thoughts. Okay. And then generally like themes emerge. Okay. With my boss called me into the office example, there could be a theme of anxious, I'm in trouble, things are going to go bad. Okay. And then we see this theme across multiple domains. Okay. It happens at work and then it happens in relationships, different kinds of setting when they watch the news. Okay. All right. And then we identify these themes of automatic thoughts, and then we can use that to identify belief systems. Okay. Core beliefs. And then when we identify the core beliefs, that's when we get to give the bird's eye view. We get to get the origin story of these beliefs. When did this belief serve you at a time where it made a whole lot of sense?
When did you become Batman?
Of course.
Yeah.
Talk about a core belief system that created a certain type of behaviors. So
yeah, everybody's crazy in that paradigm. It's lovely.
Yeah.
So how would So for me, right, for mindfulness, I tend to recommend the Calm app because one, almost every major business has it for free, and it's got a free trial, and it's got some really good basic mindfulness exercises on it to guide folks through.
Yeah.
I know CBT is operationalized enough that it's got some tools like that. Is there one that you typically recommend to people?
Ooh. For me, no. And so, yeah. Okay. Let's see.
I want them to use the workbook, man. I'm not, get off your phone.
So this is one of the warranted knocks on cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay. And so oftentimes it's viewed as more manualized. Okay. It has this reputation, and I think it's earned. Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There are literally manuals.
Exactly. And so DPT has them too. Okay.
100%. I love having a manual. It's great.
And this is where my identity as a therapist, is it hubris to say my identity as a therapist is nuanced? And so when I think about what makes sense for me for therapeutic change, and then the manualized nature of cognitive behavioral therapy. Okay. And then I think about my personality and how I navigate a lot of situations where, oh man, I am not manualized. I am shoot by the hip. There are no rules. There are some guidelines.
Well, you've been doing it long enough. You know where the rules are kind of intrinsically, and you've got a better idea on when to break them.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's the distinction between like incompetent, competent, and masterful. Right. Incompetent is like, I don't know the rules to follow, but I'm learning them.
Yeah.
Competent is, I know the rules and can follow them. Mastery is, I know the rules and I know when to break them.
Yeah. I don't know if I would call myself a master yet. Okay.
That's because your ego isn't big enough. We'll get you there.
I think of it more of, I became a therapist because, well, several reasons. Like, I feel like I have a knack for it, provides me a sense of purpose while also giving me enough to survive plus some. Okay. And then when I square cognitive behavioral therapy, it's not, I know when to break the rules. It's more, I know what cognitive behavioral therapy is getting at. And then for me as this client's therapist, and then as I read the room with what this client needs, this is how I want to get at their core belief. Okay. This is how I want
that. I mean, that makes sense, right? Like cognitive behavior therapy, when was it really canonized? It was what, the 70s?
Ooh.
Like it's been around forever.
It's been, yeah. I mean, it needs to be around forever for it to be a mainstay of therapy.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I really liked it in grad school and moved away from it because I couldn't figure out the art of it. But I got to talking to a few kind of seasoned CBT therapists, and what gave them peace with it was that CBT has been around so long. There is literally no problem that anybody has that doesn't have a deep researched tool that CBT has that works.
Trauma-focused CBT for insomnia.
Yeah, all of it, right? And it sounds like that's part of a little bit of what you're talking about is like you understand what, like the core of what CBT is trying to do, but you also understand that there's a broad range of things that this client might need to get there.
Yeah. And sometimes it's throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Oh, sure. Every time. Yeah. Endlessly.
Client A might respond really well to worksheets and the structure that it provides. Okay. And then client B might say, I came to therapy for homework. No. And so, so I like to think of the what CBT is trying to do and then the context in which it's doing it. Okay. And then as a CBT therapist, I provide a way that works for my client, ideally. Okay. And then also works for me as a therapist that's also a human with a certain style. Okay.
Yeah. When I was thinking about it, like, I think the reason why the Calm app works for the mindfulness is because they've got dozens and dozens of different ways to come at mindfulness within the app. So people can try on a few without having to be a master.
Yeah.
But they also don't have to do therapy around learning how to breathe.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering then if part of why you're kind of reticent to like recommend or have a go-to app is it's a therapeutic tool that needs a therapist on the other side of it to be safe and useful.
Yes. I mean, I haven't thought about it in that way, but as you say it, I like it. So, yeah.
And that's why, like, maybe, maybe this client, it's that app, or maybe for this client, it's this piece of paper, or for this client, it's just, they can sit and think and are pretty good at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, what comes to my mind is oftentimes in cognitive behavioral therapy, we're looking out for cognitive distortions. Okay. It's this catastrophic thinking, black and white thinking, personalization, things like that.
I feel personally attacked right now as you talk about this.
Oh boy. Okay. There's, what do you think the assumption or core belief is there to create that automatic thought?
Oh, I just always like when people whip out like this is how bad things happen in every theoretical orientation. You're like, I have some of those. Like every time.
Of course.
It doesn't matter what the orientation is, right? You're like, no, I've got problems, and that makes sense. Oh no.
Yeah. But like we were talking about shame earlier, and then I think of the risk of, what if a person just Google cognitive distortions, okay? And then, I do that distortion, and then now I feel about myself because I do, okay?
Yeah.
And then having a therapist help guide them through those kind of thoughts and processing is needed, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those moments where, like, once you're in your head trying to move things around, therapy is a good idea. What like in whatever fashion you're doing so, right?
Yeah.
I think where people kind of miss the boat on therapy is, I did an episode on kind of what therapy to get based on where you're at, and at the Maslow's, right? If you don't have food and shelter,
of course,
like your thought process is hunger. Like you need that addressed before it's time to go talk about your thought process and your feelings.
Yeah. Like sometimes I talk to people about financial stress. And then, therapy is expensive, and will this exacerbate that financial stress? But then sometimes it's, let's look into your thoughts and beliefs about finances.
Well, and it's interesting. Like I always get these questions around trying to use your insurance for therapy and how hard that can be. And I think for about probably 75% of people, just getting into a space where you've got room to talk about something is going to help.
Yes.
And so you can go to a general therapist. They don't need to be like a specialist in you and your problem. It'll go slower.
Yeah.
Right. But the model works. And then for like 1 in 4 people, they need, like us, they need that specialist that like works with this population or works with that problem in this way.
Yeah.
And there's some, for me anyway, there's peace in that about not taking insurance in my practice.
For me, so I accept insurance, and there's a few reasons that led to my decision. When I started my practice, there was urgency, and then I needed to pay bills. Okay. And then insurance was a good way to build up a caseload. Okay. But then, I mean, talk about this delicate balance where we're a privileged profession. Okay. And then therapy is a privileged practice. Okay.
Yes.
And so insurance helps me provide therapy to people that wouldn't have access to it. But talk about a blessing and a curse at the same time. And so, yeah.
Well, it does seem like it's gotten easier on folks. I remember when I started up the practice, the deal was that if you took an insurance panel, you had to say yes until you were full when they called.
Oh.
And now that's less and less of a thing. So people can kind of balance it where I'll take Medicaid and I'll see 4 Medicaid clients that I know are going to be in dire straits. Okay. And I can help them. And then that's all the Medicaid slots I'm holding.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's really helping the field have some variation in that a little bit more, which is nice.
Yeah. That and advertising what you treat and who you treat. Okay. And so
the right people start to come.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the reason why a lot of my consultations lead to a first session is because they sought me out because of the problems that I treat align with the problems they're experiencing. Yeah.
No, that's one of the nicer things too, is almost everything's through Google these days. So let's say that someone listening wanted to find a therapist that works like you. They've liked how you've talked about cognitive behavior therapy. Maybe they're one of those analytical guys and they're thinking, gosh, it would be nice to work with that kind of structure with somebody who actually gives a shit.
Yeah.
What should they be looking for if they go to like a Psychology Today or something? What would you recommend them look for in their area?
Yeah. I would say psychology today would probably be the first step in several in identifying the therapist that's right for you. Okay. And so, and this is where I think I wouldn't encourage somebody to seek out a cognitive behavioral therapist. Okay. I would encourage a person to seek out a therapist that they feel like they can eventually trust and have the confidence in helping them with what's going on, what brought them to therapy. Okay.
Well, so this is why I'm going to push back on that a little bit. So I don't feel like what I see in my students and what I see in my practice and what I see when we talk to our colleagues is the theory you're drawn to is fundamentally how you operate in a room in some way.
Okay.
And so what I try to do is as we kind of explore these and we give people like a little, like, this is what this kind of therapy looks like.
Okay.
The therapists that are drawn to doing this kind of therapy will have these things, right? They'll tend to talk like this. They'll tend to, everybody says they know how to do CBT. They're all lying. I'm sure that pisses you off. It annoys me. But so like what, let's say that they like you. They're like, oh, there's kindness, but there's also logic. Like this feels safer for me than just going to someone who's like, let's really dig into your feelings.
Okay.
Right. Most guys aren't looking for that.
I would agree. All right, let me see if I'm understanding what you're saying. Okay. So modalities in therapy draw a certain type of therapists.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing. Okay. And then if a person sees out a modality, there's kind of like this underlying assumption that this is the type of therapist I'm going to get.
Yeah, it kind of narrows the search for them. Like they still need to do the calls. They still need to make sure that interpersonal safety is there.
Okay.
The advice I tend to give is look around, but remember 30% of therapeutic outcome is just whether you and your therapist get along and respect each other.
Vibe. Yeah.
Like the vibe, 100% more important than anything else. It's the vibe.
Yeah.
But so when you open up psychology today, most people don't know what they're looking at for credentialing. Most people don't understand these modalities.
Okay.
And so it gets overwhelming really quickly.
Okay.
And so by having it narrowed down to a modality that maybe suits you, it makes that decision tree a little bit easier.
I can see that. I can see that with a lot more questions. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. A lay person who doesn't know very much about therapy, like the difference between cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy. Okay. And there's nuance. And when a person's seeking out therapy, like there's not a whole lot of energy to research. And so I need to feel better soon. And so it'd be nice if they had a trusted therapist friend that can help guide them. Okay. And but that's not available for everybody. So there's psychology today, or whatever kind of platform that they're seeking for a therapist. Okay. And then, and that's where I think of the power of the consultation. Okay.
100%.
Yeah. They got into the consultation because something in their profile, their advertising said, this person can help with what I'm going through. Okay. And then the consultation, you can get a first taste of the vibe. Okay. And that's where I encourage.
That's where you leave it. Yeah. Yeah. Get the vibe. That's more important than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, I don't know, the way that I would frame it for both kind of CBT practitioners and DBT practitioners is we tend to be providers who value skills work. And those of us that are good at the job value skills work and can get deep.
Yes.
Right.
So,
but I think like typically the guys that like to come see me, the reason why my vibe resonates with them is I'm like, first, we're going to figure out what the is going on and what you can do to make tomorrow just a little bit better.
I like that.
Right. Like, and that's what skills are for. Like, we're going to come at this. We're going to start taking some of these edges off before we ever touch whatever big shark is lurking under there. We're going to make sure you're okay.
Yeah.
Versus those like really big depth therapists that like don't mention that you're going to know how to do anything different. They're just going to mention that you feel different after therapy. It's a different vibe, right?
Okay.
And I've got referrals that I refer to those guys, right? Like I'm not saying it's a bad way to do therapy, but there are a lot of people where that's just not, if they're looking for me, that's not the vibe they're looking for.
And well, often when people come to me with previous therapy experiences that wasn't quite the right fit, okay. Oftentimes it comes in the form of, yes, thank you for helping me understand my problems and my emotions, and thank you. And then there's so what do I do about it?
And yeah, now what? Okay.
Yeah.
My parents hurt me this way. Check. Now what?
Yeah. And so, And so getting back to if somebody wants to find a therapist like me, and then schedule a lot of consultations and then listen to your gut.
No shortcuts. No shortcuts is what I'm hearing from you.
And so there you go.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think the vibe is consistent, right? If you're looking for a vibe, you've got to get on a phone with somebody. My thing is I honestly think that you can do that in 15 minutes. I don't think people need to go in for like that hour-long session with the screen. I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
Yeah.
So I am unsurprised at the kindness that comes through as you talk about your work. And I think you'll agree that you don't often hear that kind of kindness from a lot of CBT therapists.
Let me think.
Like, not that they're unkind people. There's like a stoicism to them a little bit.
Yes.
And not like like I don't feel anything stoicism, but like I let it move through me so you can let it move through you.
Yeah. So one thing I've been working on for myself is being able to accept compliments. And so thank you.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's all right. The interview I just recorded with a former leader of mine, I think I told you, like, he was really complimentary at me, and I had to like go and like wipe up my face after the episode because it's just so hard to take in that.
Oh yeah. Right? To let it sink and felt. Yeah. Oftentimes it's for me and the people I work with, like, isn't that just standard? So yeah,
and I think that's the problem with a lot of the, like, within the kind of manosphere and talking about self-improvement, is this like Navy SEAL ideal of just get up and do whatever and be the thing. And while that's powerful and it works for some guys, I think it inherently cheapens what you achieve.
Yeah.
Like, if this is just what everybody does, that means that the only time we're ever assessing is negative.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And eventually everybody makes a mistake in whatever they're doing.
Of course. And
you need both ends to balance that out a little bit.
We can celebrate our accomplishments and the way that we got them. Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, of course. So kind of jumping into the mainstay questions, right? What is a truth about masculinity you learned before you were 12 that remains true today?
Okay. Yeah. So when you first posed this question, one of my memories from childhood came up. Okay. And so my parents got divorced when I was 11 years old. Okay. And it was not the worst divorce, but it was not the best. Okay. And I remember pretty vividly, like, I was in the car in Houston driving down I-10. Okay. And then, it was one of those moments where I was like, I really got to hear my father's thoughts. Okay. And it came with a warning. He said, Bryce, don't end up like me, having to start your life over at 50. Okay. And so, and then that sunk in. Okay. And then, and even though in phases of my life where marriage was not in my realm or my thought process, like, I knew I do not want to get a divorce. Okay. And then learning more and more, I've learned about how divorce is incredibly hard on everybody, and especially men. Okay.
Yes.
Especially
middle-aged men.
Yeah. So part of a truth about masculinity, I learned that I needed to pick my partner well. Okay. And one of the criteria about who I picked was, imagine yourself getting a divorce with this person. Okay. And then how would that go? Okay. I mean, if I gave my anxiety a platform, okay, what would be the worst probable situation? Okay. And and then the partner I picked, I love her a lot and everything like that. And then one of the reasons was, if we were to get a divorce, her parents are divorced too. And so we knew it was a possibility when getting married, that we can still respect each other. And now we can co-parent. I have the confidence that we could co-parent well. Okay.
Yeah. That if the unfortunate thing of divorce happens where you two just can't make a turn at some point, you know that you can at least be humans in the world together afterwards.
Yeah. And then couplehood and masculinity it's almost expected. And so,
Yeah, I think like the frame that makes the most sense for me lately on that regard is masculinity is powerful and it's strong, but if it's doesn't have anything to attach to, it withers.
Yeah.
Like if our various aspects of ourselves as men aren't connected to be in service of someone or something important to us,
Yeah.
it becomes incredibly hard.
The lone wolf is most at risk. So
Yeah. And solely an American concept, right? Like it's just not a thing that happens anywhere else in the world because we're not supposed to be alone.
Yeah.
It's a very
our
rare
society isn't
individual.
constructed that way.
No.
No.
Well, so I love that. I think that's really a beautiful moment for you and your dad, and particularly like for a dad of his time to say, this is hurting me, to his son in a way that wasn't like, go be mad at your mom, but like, hey, you're a man, you're going to get here one day.
Yeah.
This is what this looks like. I think that's a powerful gift he gave you.
It was powerful and then also remarkable because that's not usually what I saw from my dad. He had
So he was a pretty stoic guy.
Stoic and calm and didn't see a whole lot of anger from him. But then also, I think one of the reasons why I became a therapist is that he was hard to read. And so,
so you got good at reading.
And so that was a moment where I really got to witness genuine feelings from him and like how he was thinking about his life at that moment. I've got to start it over. Yeah.
Well, and I think the other thing I like about that too is with a guy like that, getting invited into those depths feels really special.
Yeah.
When it happens.
Yeah.
My dad was a fairly stoic guy in those moments in time that I remember where like you got to peak. They were big. They're always big.
It's so special. And so, oh man.
And it's always in a car, man. I swear to God, like every dude, the conversation with the dad was like on a road trip, driving to work, driving to school. That's when the moments happen. So guys, if you've got kids, be the one driving them back and forth to school. Apparently it's the only time dads can talk.
Well, you're doing, I mean, that's part of the reason why men have a hard time with therapy because it's just talking.
Sitting here, it's just awkward. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
So thank you, man. That's a really wonderful answer. The second question is, tell us about a time when your pursuit of masculinity hurt you.
Yeah. So I feel like it's known that finances are often tied with masculinity. Okay. And so
the provider dynamic.
Yeah. And then my relationship with finances, I'm avoidant of it. Okay. And so I'm avoidant of spending money. I'm avoidant of recognizing the need to make money. Okay. And all this. And so, and then I think it became, I don't think I would use the word emasculate. Okay. I think I would say like, this was one of my biggest self-consciousness. Like this was the hard thing to present about myself and it felt vulnerable to do so. Okay. Yeah. And then I can see how my anxiety around finances was really impactful. Like for the longest time, I was on the fence about having kids. And one of the reasons was because of the financial element of it. Okay. And so, and then the expectation of being a provider, making a lot of money, being enough if you make X amount of money. Okay. Yeah. It didn't really serve me. It's, if I were to be able to decouple finances from masculinity, I can say, yeah, money is a need and I need to navigate it with intention. Okay.
Yeah. So it sounds like for you, the kind of masculine connection with that provider story put so much pressure on you that it overwhelmed you and you had to disconnect.
Yeah. Disconnect. But then also there's at times when I felt disqualified. Okay.
Yeah. Like I'm not a man because I can't X.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't raise children because I've got student loan debt. Okay. Or I can't raise children until I reach the 6-figure mark. Okay. Yeah. But that didn't really serve me for when I met the person that I knew that I could have kids with.
Yeah.
Okay. A big point of conversation when she was like, Bryce, like you told me that you don't want kids. Can you let me know why? Okay. And then, well, there's this financial aspect of kids. And then being able to, me and my wife, we complemented each other very well. And so, but we are incredibly different people. And so being able to be in a relationship where my wife can say, you know what, like, I can take this on. Okay. Not
So she's kind
being
of
the sole earner, but more like,
but like the manager of it all.
Yeah. She does that. And then I bring other things to the table. And so
there you go.
Yeah.
So the kind of the masculine story you had around it really almost denied you one of the greater things in your life, which has been fatherhood.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, and then I was fearful of, like, do I want to bring kids into this world if I can't provide for them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then being able to trust my partner and then recognize that we're a team, like, that was.
Yeah, move
really
that
freeing.
from this is what a man does to this is what a couple does. This is what parents do.
Yes.
Really shifted that for you.
Yeah. So we have a responsibility as a team. Okay.
Mm-hmm. You got lanes. I always like to frame it as lanes.
We have lanes. Her lane is finances, making sure that we have a roof over our head. Like, I contribute to that lane, but then my lane is making sure that we have square meals. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
You got shelter. I got food. Let's go.
Nice. Exactly. So
I like how the basics are split there. That's pretty good.
Yeah. I joke around with her every time she goes to the grocery store. Do you remember how?
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Good deal, man. No, I really like that. And I think that's a lot of guys need to hear that.
Yeah.
Because, that ideal that the only way to be a man is to be a provider.
Yeah.
And it's not even that, like, you couldn't have been a provider. It's that the pressure of it was so all encompassing that you had to retreat. Yeah.
Yeah. And talk about experiencing shame and how I manage that emotion with avoidance. And but now that I've addressed that, have a partner that really helps
you can take that
on, like, then my life is turning out the way it is, and I'm pretty satisfied with it. And so
great, man.
Yeah.
Good. I love that. Yeah, I don't think there's a client I've ever worked with where money doesn't come up at some point in their care.
Oh, of course. I mean,
right? Like it's so tied, and particularly for American men, like our culture is money focused.
Yeah.
Like it's the whole like provider button.
Yeah. It's so strange. Sometimes it's a need, like food and oxygen. Okay. And then sometimes
status, security.
Yeah. But then it's a concept that we all created at the same time. So yeah.
Or like some guys where it's like counting coup, right? Where like money is competitive and they're winning or not.
Oh yes. I mean,
it gets
how
tricky.
men often compare themselves to each other. And so yeah.
No, that makes sense to me. Well, so let's go out on a high note on the other side of that coin then. Tell us about a time where pursuing your masculinity empowered you.
Yeah. This is an interesting one for me. I thought about it in preparing for this conversation. Okay. And so I asked myself, like, when is the time I feel the most masculine? Okay. And then I started to wonder if that was the fair way to frame the question. Okay. And then eventually in my thought process, it became, when is the time I feel the most confident? Okay. When is the time that I feel like I'm contributing to the people around me? Okay. And so I guess when I feel masculine, it's almost more like a byproduct. Okay. Yeah. When I do these things, whether it's cooking a meal for my family or scoring a point in ultimate frisbee. Okay. It's not quite that I feel masculine. It's that I feel good about myself. Okay.
So for you, the masculinity is so kind of ingrained, it's hard to distinct. Like me wanting to be masculine in this moment is contributing to a really good moment. Yeah. It's not really been your experience.
Let me think about that for a moment. Okay. And so one thing that, if I can toot my own horn, okay, and like the way that I navigate things is that I really followed my nose with my interests and what made me feel good. Okay. And then sometimes that led me to want to pursue cooking. Okay. And then sometimes that led me to be the captain of the wrestling team in high school. Okay. All right. And so one thing I appreciate about myself is that I really let my interests and my feelings and what led me to feel good guide me instead of what led me to feel masculine.
Well, it sounds like you had things that fairly early on gave you masculine status enough where you didn't worry about it.
Yes.
Right. So, like, I like cooking too.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I love feeding people. It's my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
But I like being a therapist.
Yeah.
But I don't think I would have been able to be comfortable in a feminine field
Mm-hmm.
if I hadn't had my uniform. That kind of like, like no one can say I'm not a man. And I imagine you being captain of the wrestling team.
Yeah.
Right. Like, yeah, okay, I'll twist you into a pretzel. Leave me alone. I'm gonna go make my.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go make my thing.
Yeah. Well. Part of the reason why I wrestle is to get the bullying football players off my back. Okay. And so, yeah. And then let me think about it. Did I feel like I could pursue more traditionally feminine pursuits like therapy and cooking because I knew that I had this, like,
because you were secure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you had security. And then I don't know if I would have the security if I didn't have my 5'11", 6 foot on a good day kind of build. Okay. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I would have that if I didn't know that I could handle myself in a fight. Mm-hmm. Okay. So yeah, this is what I think I was saying earlier. Like, there's some forms of traditional masculinity that we need to keep, and there's some things that we need to omit, and it's so hard to identify. And then so there's well, that's one of the earlier episodes that is going to be published is the idea that these are things that are identified as masculine because more men than women do these things, mm-hmm. but each of us has a mix.
Yeah.
And if you're a man, you probably have more things that are in alignment with masculine things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you go on this idea where a man does all of these things or a man does only these things, you're living a very incomplete life.
Or confined. That's mm-hmm. what I think of.
Yeah, confined and hurt usually. Yeah. Like it rubs, those things that you don't get to tend to, mm-hmm. either at minimum rob joy out of you. Like, if I had listened to some things, I certainly wouldn't have like made the birthday cake for my friend's party this year, mm-hmm. which was awesome. It was epic. It was a great cake. Everybody loved it.
Yeah. And talk about feeling confidence and pride. And so, right? Yeah, which is a lot of what people aim for when they pursue masculinity.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. And who knows, would I feel this sense of freedom and my expression and what I choose to do if I didn't have at least some baseline of masculine traits?
Well, I'm guessing if the wrestling team didn't get the football players off your back, your relationship with your masculinity would have changed.
Probably.
If the bullying hadn't stopped.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Probably.
Because no one's just going to come out of, however many years of school that you're taking those beatings and ridicule without something.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I can be a therapist with cauliflower ear and then confuse a lot of people.
Just go with it. Lean in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Bryce, man, this has been so wonderful. And I'm probably going to have you come back on so we can talk more dad stuff later.
Oh, yeah. I'm enjoying myself.
I love it. I love it. And when I always love talking to therapists that do the work and like how complex being a dad is for us.
Okay.
Right. And it's, I don't know, it's just fun to explore for me. And I imagine that it'll be useful for some other folks to kind of hear.
Yeah. Well,
both the lessons and some of the imperfections that just exist.
Yeah. Well, I'll preface that conversation with, I'm still figuring it out.
Well, you will be for the next 30 years. So that's just fine.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was our conversation with Bryce. Thanks so much for listening to it. Before we go, though, I want to clarify a few things. I had been doing this just in the show notes and doing it on screen, but I realized we've got a lot of folks that are tuning in and only listening. So I want to take some time at the end of every episode now to do some of those clarifications. So the first one is CBT often works for men. It's one of the modalities that we know is really good with men in a broad range of topics with a broad range of things. That doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work for you. If you tried CBT and it didn't work, don't lose hope. Make sure to try something something else. And maybe it might have been the wrong therapist to do it with. Remember, 30% is going to be that vibe that we talked about during the episode, not so much the modality. So while this might guide you to something that you can try, if it didn't work, don't let it wreck the rest of your work. We talked a little bit about insurance and barriers to care. I feel like we were a little dismissive of even with insurance, it's still hard to get to therapy, whether it's because there just isn't therapists in your area taking the insurance with wait list, whether it's because even with your insurance, that copay is still too high to get in because money is real. Whatever it is, there's a lot of barriers to care, and insurance is only one aspect of it. I don't want to make anybody feel dismissed for that, and I don't want to not acknowledge how hard it is to get in. And the last one I want to talk about is shame and guilt. We talked a little bit about that during the episode, and we kind of highlighted it as a negative emotion. It's not that it's a negative emotion, it's that we tend to misuse that emotion. If you're consistently messing up with your loved ones, doing things that you don't like that you're doing, and you don't feel any shame about that, and you don't feel any guilt about that, it's going to be incredibly hard to repair with those family members and yourself. So like any emotion, there's no such thing as a bad emotion. It's simply how we use it and what we want to use it for. That's going to make the difference. If anything in this episode shook something loose in you, or there's anything that you're kind of still chewing on in your head, make sure to have a conversation with somebody about it, or take 5 minutes and write it down and write out what's going on for you. And then if you're comfortable, do us a favor and leave a comment and let us know what this episode brought up for you. It'll hopefully help normalize some things for other guys, but also maybe just give you a chance to get something off your chest. Just make sure you're doing so safely and appropriately. We'll see you next time.